Which Dominic?
Evans couldn't make it.
Okay, thanks. I just want to update the title.
Awesome. Okay, so everyone who's joining us, we're going to start the mental health and the arts panel with all our lovely panelists. So everyone here, please turn off your microphone and your video until otherwise instructed by the panelists, but feel free to use the Zoom chat to leave any comments while they're introducing themselves. And for the panelists, when people pop into the rooms, don't worry, I'll be handling that and moving people in, so you don't have to stress about that during your panel. So feel free to start. I will be here, but I'll just be muted with my video off, so all the attention's on you.
Great. So mental health of the arts, what does that mean? So as far as this panel is concerned, it means two things. Number one, people involved in the arts have a higher risk, according to studies, of mental health issues and mental illness. Number two is that the arts can be a solution to solving mental health issues and mental illness. So we're going to look at both of those today. And so first we'll start with a video that has by Dominic Evans, who couldn't make it from some complications, but did a video introducing everyone. So we'll watch that. Everyone can see my screen? Cool.
Others who occasionally...
Skip to 1 minute. There we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dominic Evans, and I am a multiply disabled trans and queer filmmaker, film scholar, and Twitch streamer. I'm sorry I couldn't be on this panel like I originally anticipated. A lot of my work revolves around disability representation, and that includes mental health. I started streaming on Twitch because I saw a major lack of representation for those with physical disabilities on the platform. This was especially true for someone like me who plays games laying down due to neuromuscular disability and chronic pain. As I met others on the platform, what I discovered was that the vast majority of people I knew streaming and content creating were dealing with some type of mental health struggle. Some who had a diagnosis, and others who occasionally dealt with anxiety or depression. This panel will explore mental health and the arts. Those of us who live with a diagnosis deserve representation, but it starts with recognizing our place in artistic mediums. I'm pleased to introduce you to the various members of this panel. Without further ado, let's get started. First, we have Aizhou Liu. Aizhou is a singer-songwriter, music producer, creative marketer, and freelance model from China who is currently living in LA. Beijing-born and Shanghai-raised, Aizhou grew up in a richly multicultural environment and a vibrant community fused of traditional Chinese and modern Western culture. Her unique upbringing shines through in the music she writes and produces. She firmly believes music to be a vehicle of storytelling and social change. Aizhou is a graduate of Berklee College of Music's Contemporary Writing and Production program. Although she is a classically trained pianist, her writing style also blends influences of pop, rock, electronic, and jazz. For more info on Aizhou, please visit www.aizhoumusic.com or find her on Instagram at Aizhou Music. Next up is Allilsa Fernandez. Allilsa graduated magna cum laude from Stony Brook University in December 2018 with a BA in psychology, despite being told she would never be able to attend school because of her struggles with psychosis. Allilsa is currently a volunteer member with Sylvia Rivera Law Project, working in shelter organizing, and as a peer specialist in Lenox Hill Hospital. She founded Peer Mental Health Alliance, an organization that provides resources, peer-to-peer support, and creative arts programming which aims to end the stigma. Through her activism, Allilsa fought for and assured ADA compliance at Stony Brook. She recently created a Facebook group called Mental Health Pandemic to address the mental health needs surrounding COVID-19, and helped found Disability Underground, which addresses healthcare advocacy and mutual aid surrounding COVID. Furthermore, Allilsa is working with mutual aids in New York City to help with food distribution that creates access for people with disabilities, including homeless people with disabilities. Our next panelist is Sarah Rinder. Sarah is a science teacher from New Jersey who hopes to spread happiness wherever she goes. She loves traveling, gaming, and creating, and she lives by the motto, never give up, never surrender. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Blythe Schulte. Blythe, a strategic consultant and multi-genre composer, comes from a multi-ethnic, synthetic perspective. She placed her original toy product with Mattel Toys, participated in a virtual reality collaborative with Harvard/MIT, and has previously interned with the Kurland Agency. Her album, Synthetic, debuted at number 7 on Amazon's Broadway and Vocalist charts upon release, to coincide with her appearance as a finalist on ABC's Toy Box. Blythe debuted her original gospel tune, Out of Many One, to an audience of 90 million plus live broadcast. She is a cum laude graduate of the Berklee College of Music. Schulte's Wash Your Hands jingle, featuring CDC guidelines, will be featured on an entertainment product by company Rabbit Tanaka, licensor for creative brands such as Dragon Ball Z, Rick and Morty, and Game of Thrones. She recently released an original blues track, Old LA, available on all streaming platforms. Look out for Blythe's original multi-genre album release this October, featuring some selections from Bearcat, her original musical, and fabulous fellow Berklee alumni. Dominic Martin is our next panelist. Dominic has been a cosplayer for around 6 years with a keen interest in Doctor Who, which has led him to doing acting and writing within that community. Outside of cosplay, Dominic is a full-time carer for his mother. His mental health has been something that has affected him for several years through depression, and it has always been a challenge for him. But Dominic has always tried to take steps to improve it, even though it has felt like a mountain at times. We also have Justin Ashbrook. Justin is a junior in college at Berklee College of Music. He came there originally in 2017 wanting to be a music teacher and a professional pianist, but now he's planning on opening either a comic book store or a charity related to comic books after he graduates in 2021 with a degree in music business with concentration in entrepreneurship. Justin is also writing a comic book, The Amazing Bug and Plant Girl, which will be released sometimes next month. Beside his love for comic books, he plays piano, writes film and television reviews, and plans for his future business. Finally, we have Justus Armstrong, and I will let them introduce themselves. I'm so glad I got the opportunity to introduce you to all these amazing panelists, and if you'd like to check out my work, please check out filmdis.com for my recent study into disability representation on television, or follow me on Twitter at Dominic Evans.
All right. Thanks for that, Dominic, even though you can be here. So let's, Justus, I tried to contact him. I couldn't get in touch with him. So let's just go ahead with the first question. So part one, establishing the problem. So while mental health issues and mental illnesses are not the same, they are similar and in some instances can be the same for some individuals. A study in Iceland in 2015, published in Nature Neuroscience, showed that genetic factors which increase bipolar disorder and schizophrenia are found in 25% more often in people in creative professions, quote unquote, than people who chose less creative professions. Creative professions are like an artist, stuff like that. And an example of a non-creative profession that they used in the study would be like a farmer. Why do you think studies like this claim that people involved in the arts have a higher risk of mental illness? And anyone can, we can just jump, you can just jump in. We don't have to go in any specific order.
If I would, I think, and I don't necessarily agree with that claim per se, because I don't know what the study is based upon, but 25% I think is probably not, like, it is significant, but also we have to look at whether the study look at people with whether they have genetic influences in that study and whether we have a control group. I would agree that artists definitely do need to be more in tune with our emotions, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can control it or our mental illness is like something that's out of hand. Well, I think this is something I think the general public, no matter what your profession is going to deal with at some point in your career. But as an arts person, we're just more exposed to their feelings, but I wouldn't say we're more impacted by it per se.
I kind of agree with that. And I saw Mona just added in the comments something that I was basically going to say. I think that people with mental illness are more inclined to be artsy. It's either a form of release. So I think it's, I don't know if it's just a weird correlation that it ends up being like that. I also have to wonder too, if that study also looked at other fields, because I'm not in like just an art geared field, but I know a lot of people who struggle with mental illness. So I don't know if this is necessarily something that is just more, or it's just a high enough percent that they said this is a very high percentage, because I think in a lot of fields that we can have that as well.
I agree that it's prevalent in a lot of fields. I see it in tech, I see it in entrepreneurship, I see it in music, dancing, everything else that I've been lucky enough to come into exposure with. And I think it comes from really us as humans needing some sort of outlet to release and express our emotions healthfully. So if that becomes music for you, or drawing, or yoga, or something completely different that I did not list, coding, that's part of the natural human experience. And I think as artists, it's a little bit more amplified, because part of like an artist's success in business is how well they are able to touch other people through their work and basically disseminate their message. So I think that it's more widely known that artists are open with their struggles, but I think that it's something that we all face.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say as well, because obviously there's going to be a lot more variables that would have lots of factors into someone's personal health. So it depends on their upbringing and everything like that, as well as the fact in creative professions and industries, there'll be a lot of pressure, whether it's self-induced or coming externally. So I would say in terms of that study, I'm very curious to know what they're based on entirely, but I would say no real safety spot, really. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would actually be interested in that as well. The article I was reading about the study didn't have like much more information, and it didn't. So I'd be curious to hear that as well.
This is Allilsa. And I think the study may not be comprehensive of every element out there. For example, lawyers, doctors, engineers, just to name a few, we don't have studies on them because that profession has been told, you cannot even speak about mental health. How dare you? If you even talk about it, you're fired or you're looked at as quote, quote, crazy or quote, quote, weirdo and quote, quote, psycho. So we don't have studies to truly compare with other industries. I think with artists, they're more open, which is what the expression of art is. We tend to explore our emotions and explore our thoughts and explore who we are in our identities, in our environment, in our souls, in our life. So it comes more easy for us to open up and talk about these things. So there might be more research there based on other industries. So I wouldn't say just artists have mental issues or they have more mental issues than other people. I think we're more open to talk about it than other industries.
In the comments too, I see Emma added something along those lines as well, like where artists are they're pushed to really express those through their art forms. They have an outlet for it. So it's a little bit more easily seen. Whereas like in some of my teacher groups, if I were to mention like, oh, I have anxiety, I've seen teachers that jump on like, why do you have anxiety about your job? You should quit. Like, you can't be taking mental health medicine. You need to be like totally perfect to teach these kids, and you don't. But like you said, it's very hush hush in a lot of other fields, whereas art, it's like, okay, we can express this through a dance or through a painting or through our music and show how we're feeling. Where other jobs, it's just, it doesn't matter how you feel, they just worry about what you do. Definitely.
Yeah, all great points, kind of pointing out that there's not necessarily a causation to that. If it is, it's because of other factors, like people mentioned, the other jobs can't be open about it, stuff like that. So let's move on to the next question. According to a 2015 report, I don't know why all these are 2015, released by the U.S. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, 10% of people in the arts industry drank alcohol to excess at least once a month. 13.7% used illicit drugs at least once a month. And the arts industry had the third highest percentage of these of any industry in the report. Why do you think this is?
I think some of it has to do with the romanticism that artistic types, some people may tend to have about drugs and alcohol. I have had creative writer friends that told me I need to do mushrooms because Lewis Carroll did, and personally, I don't support that. I think that we need to focus on our wellness and our health, and if drugs and alcohol are something that's going to be harmful to that, I don't think it's worth the art. I know a lot of people would disagree with that, but I think part of it is really the romanticism. So many role models, like I'm super into jazz music. If you look at Miles Davis or Chet Baker, like a lot of them did coke, but that's not really what makes them the iconic musicians and truly inspiring people. Like even though their life was filled with a lot, I don't think it's the drugs that makes them, even though a lot of, I think, misconceptions happen. So it's really good if we can help people get educated and point them towards resources that show them, you can be successful and you can be as healthy as you're trying to be.
This is a Jill, so I have to really second that. They really are romanticizing it. And going back to what I said earlier, if you see a lawyer doing drugs, you're going to lose your bar. If you see a doctor doing drugs, again, you're going to lose your credentials, psychologists, so forth. I think they're more hush-hush. And I have seen doctors and lawyers who do drugs and are psychedelics and into that. In the art realm, and I think that that's good to point out, in the art realm, we are open once again to explore that. I see artists who use psychedelic drugs as a form of expression, as a form of connecting different realms and exploring spirituality, mental struggles, like so many things. It's not just mental health, right? It's more deeper than that, because that's art. Going in deep and who you are, what are your thoughts, what are your emotions. And again, I think it's just creating that space. I don't think artists per se have a higher rate of substance abuse they're more open. And I agree with, I think it's because of this like people romanticize it. You know, you have the guitarist with the cigar, how cool, or the painter who's popping mollies, and but it's really the culture more than I think the people who actually do it.
I think in addition to the culture, it's important to point out that I think it's a lot of competition. And a lot of times, I think artists, we see a lot more of that in the field. Art was something I wanted to get into, and then I wanted to go to college for it. And then I kind of panicked and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. And I ended up totally switching my career paths for that. And I know a lot of friends who are into art, and some of them pick up like drug use or alcohol use as a coping mechanism, because you can be trying your hardest. And, you know, if you try your hardest, like I went into biology, I try my hardest at biology and I can get an A on the test. You try your hardest in art and it might be your best art piece ever, but somebody might have something better. And I think sometimes that's what artists end up using to cope with that. And again, there's competition in other fields and other jobs too. So that kind of mix of, well, it's less hush hush. They talk about it a little bit more too. And they could use it as, oh, well, I'm not drinking to cope with my anxiety. I'm drinking to get better ideas. I'm not doing drugs to, you know, forget everything. I'm doing it to see some cool, like, you know, mushroom visions and get that down. So that's what I think it would be. But that's just, you know, from that stress that I think that is tacked onto it, and kind of a mix of the two.
Yeah, I would have to agree in that respect as well. I mean, in terms of its use in the art world, I mean, it can be, again, yeah, it is both a case of others can be hush hush, whereas I'd say it's not that many in the grand scheme of things that would use it in that way. Obviously, I don't know the particular stats, but yeah, I mean, I'm just drawn to remembering how it was covered in representations of the art world, like in shows like BoJack Horseman, and you can see all the alcohol and the drugs being used in that sense. Obviously, that's very detached from reality, but it's still a case of that romanticization, as was said before. So, yeah, I have nothing really to add to that.
And to add to that, I also wanted to say there's also this push. So I've worked in the film industry as well. And if anyone's been in the film industry behind the scenes, you know that you're working 11 hours straight. No joke. Sometimes 16 hours. So this show that you've seen for 3 months, that was built in 1 day or 2 days. It depends on the budget. It depends on the industry. You know, so you really have a lot of work. This is how they are producing shows in a few days, but once they show it, it's prolonged. And so people are exploited, oftentimes behind the scenes, and we have heard so many models and artists talk about this. They are themselves picking up the drug habits, but they're introduced to the drug habits. So oftentimes what you see is that people are saying, hey, take Coke because it's going to help you push through it, or take speed because it's going to help you push through it. So we see a lot of, and I was reminded about this through Sarah, you know, we see a lot of push on drugs for the competition. Like, you got to stay up and you got to stay focused and you got to finish this project, or you have timelines. And how do you do that? So pick up the drug habit that way. And one of the biggest industry that talks about it is models. Models say that once they enter the industry, they are literally offered Coke. Each model, they're like, hey, just take this to make it, because their photo shoots are going on for 11 hours straight, but continuously. And also they have to keep the weight off, so the drugs may help with that. It's a lot of exploitations as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then from what I know about the music industry, I think there's a lot of similarities there. Like a lot of people will spend like 11 hours in a practice room or in a recording session. And also what you talked about, like getting like underpaid for your work. I think that's common with music as well. I want to ask a follow-up question about this. because it seems like a lot of you guys are saying that that artists use substances even though they don't necessarily need to. So what are some of the ways we can convince artists to not use substances?
So this is a Jilsa. I wouldn't necessarily say to convince them. I think everybody has the freedom of choice, and
Right.
you know, but with that being said, I think one of the most important things, and we are starting to see artists like Demi Lovato, Catherine Zeta-Jones, people who have mental health diagnosis, they're starting to talk about these demands behind the industry. And I think one of the biggest things that we can start talking about, particularly to artists and the industry, is taking time off. And in the long run, not convincing the artists, but convincing the industry to change the layout. Because 11 hours straight, a lot. And you're just like, work. You have to have breaks. And what does those breaks look like? What does mental health in an artist space looks like? What's that we don't have to be subjected to? Because thinness is what we're subjected to, that we don't have to follow and feel healthy. You know, I think, and we've seen that in France. Like if anybody has heard about that research and the legislation that's been passed in France, they actually made it a legislation where industries cannot mandate models to be thin because it's unhealthy. You know, they're pushing them to extremes. So I think once we start pushing the shift to the industry rather than individuals, we may see better mental health for the individuals.
I think Aizhou, you were saying something before, but you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. So I just want to kind of like point it out because prior to moving to the US, because I was offered like kind of a pro model kind of career path for me, but I feel that I do agree with a lot of things like you were saying, Lilsa, and I just like I think there are a lot of expectations of like what kind of standards are set upon me that I have to like take, you know, it's like a box that I have to check or something. I mean, the same could be said about music, but it's way looser. I think, you know, musicians will not, like other musicians, I think will not judge you if you don't take drugs, I think, for example, because I think although it is romanticized, it's not a requirement. And also adding on to that, I think the only, you know, taking drugs or anything recreational is a freedom of choice, especially, you know, in the US. And I feel that self-care is just the most important thing for us because we have to remember before we're artists, we're human. So in order to be a human, we have to rest and we have to take time to take care of ourselves. And so doing all of that will ensure the art that we create are genuine and that we're not overexhausting our bodies to create something. So that's just what I feel about this topic. Thanks.
I think piggybacking off of that, I have this theory that if you are creatively exhausted, you will only create creatively exhausted art. So I think it's really important to, well, first of all, like to actually go with the question, I think we need to just have more discussions like this, I think, for creative types, because the more that we are able to educate ourselves and educate ourselves together, whether that's doing research on our own or with other people, the better we are off to make decisions. It's like with anything, like you don't go and take a driver's test without studying for it. So if you're going to look at drugs as an outlet, then you need to get educated on the good things and the bad things about it. And me or no one else can make that decision for you, but I do think it's our responsibility to provide people information when we can. And I think as far as like getting exhausted goes, it's really important that we try to initiate some sort of systemic movement or change. I don't know how that would happen. I've literally been locked in a room without food or water for 12 hours and then sent out to go sing. This is not in like super recently, but I just think a lot of artists or people who have been artists have experiences like that, and it's not okay. I know that that can also be said for ER doctors who literally don't sleep for weeks. So I think that that's also something that at times you understand what you're signing on for. But eventually, like in an idealistic world, I would like to see that change, or little by little make it more acceptable for people to feel like they can eat when they're on their job, or drink water, or take a break to go do yoga or work out if it's going to help them get awake.
Definitely. I would piggybacking right onto that. I was going to say, I think the big thing in preventing, bad habits forming is to have those good options available, making them known to artists and saying, whether there's like a quiet space or a yoga room, something where you can get rid of that stress, and also like, when you have to wait for a certain amount of time, that you can do that healthily instead of reverting to other things. Because if we make that more known, if we make that the more popular option, because right now, when we look at media and we look around, a lot of those things are really revolving around drugs and alcohol and going out and partying, and that's what they show like a lot of artistic types are doing. But I think somebody mentioned in the comments that they're like, oh, I go on like a marathon to think about things. That's something that like I probably, honestly, a marathon would probably be very unhealthy for me because I'm very unfit. But like it's showing that, okay, we can have those options available as well, and having them in creative spaces especially. So whether it's, providing, good food to eat, so that way somebody's not sitting there locked in a room for 12 hours without food, or providing like a treadmill if they're sitting there getting bored, and something that they can do and just kind of get their mind racing while they walk and they can think. But yeah.
Yeah, say communication and education are really the key, and if you're trying to really convince someone that it's not the right route, I mean, obviously there is freedom of choice, so I think the best you can really do is just make sure that the information is all clear and what you're getting into, but as well as that, just really just make sure that all of the other options, as was said before, are available to the best extent that you can, and hopefully minimize on the peer pressure as well, since that can also be a factor as well.
Okay, so I want to move on to the second part of this discussion, which is, well, we've already touched on it, I think, about, but just how I have my questions organized here in terms of kind of solving these problems. So for many people, getting help is not a choice and they can't get help. But for many others, they do have a choice to get help, whether it be substance abuse, mental illness, just mental health problems in general. But they still choose not to. Why do you think this is? And how do we, I think I used the wrong word last time with convince, but like, how do we encourage those people who can get help to get help?
So I have to say, when asking for help, we have to be conscious of marginalized communities. And in marginalized spaces, there isn't mental health access. It's not as easy as people who have money or have the insurance and the connections. So I think that should be said automatically, because you have a lot of artists who are freelancers and belong to marginalized communities. It's very hard to have that access, particularly to therapists of color, LGBTQIA therapists or TGNC therapists. It's very difficult because the mental health industry in itself is white supremacist. They're built by mostly white therapists. The schooling that you need is very challenging for marginalized community. So I think before we even recommend to seek help, we need to build the help. And what does that help look like? We need to be able to create the access to educational systems so that more marginalized people can get into the space, so that we can have better access to mental health. So that's first off. And second off, being able to provide social-based mental health. We think about mental health, we think CBT, which is cognitive therapy, or dialect therapy, or these therapies. But guess what? If you live, an example, in poverty and you're hungry, what good is it to you to talk every single week with a therapist and do cognitive therapy if you're still hungry? Or if you don't have housing, what good is it for you to talk to a therapist every single week, but you're still struggling with housing? So on more systemic change, holistic change, I think, we're still going to struggle. And I want to point that out before moving on to how to support people, because I wanted to say we're leaving a lot of people without support. So that's first. We have to have a systematic change. Now, encouraging people to speak up, I think that starts with us, the peers, the people who have gone through the mental health struggles, that when we're sharing our stories openly and without shame, it helps others say, wow, I heard that person speak, and feel more comfortable in their skins, whether they want to share or don't want to share, up to them. But it allows for that comfortability so then they can seek help. And also the community being able to collect therapists or links or ways to connect artists to providers, because when you're struggling, it's very hard to do that research yourself. So if the industry itself provides that outlet, or even creates community-based therapy, meaning peer-based support, that's what I meant, peer-based support. If the industry itself can do that, that's a way to, one, eliminate the lack of access, and two, be able to create a more long, sustainable way where, one, people can come out, and two, people can get support.
Hey, Justus just was able to join us. So, Justus, we're talking about how to one, increase what Allilsa just said about like trying to increase access to people getting the help they need, and number two, for people who have access to it but don't want help, how do we encourage them to seek out help? And you can also introduce yourself quickly.
Well, I'm Justus. I apologize being late. I had issues with just being in a different time zone over here. Sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, sure. So so we're talking about how we increase access for people to get the help they need, whether it be like a substance abuse problem or a mental illness or just a general mental health problem. And also the second part would be for people who have access to it but choose not to have it, how do we encourage them to get the help they need?
Yes, for the question of access, I find the internet is definitely a very valuable resource. I think everyone, especially in the time of coronavirus, is finding this out. There are a lot of great free online resources for remote therapy and counseling. We can make available to people who may not have health insurance or financial resources to be able to get help in the first place, and making those resources publicly known, sharing it with people in your online community, making that available can be very important. And for people who have access but may not be inclined to pursue help, one of the things I was talking about with some friends yesterday, I noticed a lot of dialogue surrounding mental health support, whether that's therapy, addiction counseling, the suicide hotline, focuses a lot on what we call staying in the present moment, which sounds like a cliche, but you'll notice that theme recurs a lot. Like I've noticed when I was in the middle of my some of the worst times with my mental health, you get the same advice from a lot of people, which is just take it one day at a time. Do what you can to get through today. All those things that narrow your time horizon just to make it manageable to function in. You don't have to have all of your issues sorted out for your whole life or week or month or year or anything. But if you can make it through today, if you can make it through the next few minutes, if you can make it through the hour, that becomes a little bit more manageable. So for people in your life who are, maybe resistant to pursue treatment, a lot of it, it's not because they don't want help. It's more than likely because it doesn't feel manageable to them, or it doesn't feel worthwhile to pursue treatment when they feel like there's so much weight or so much pressure that pursuing any kind of help seems counterproductive. To get them to see that perspective, you want to encourage them to think smaller and start with just little pieces of time at a bit, where if it could become manageable to get help, to communicate, or to just put yourself in a better spot concerning your mental health. If you can do that just a little bit at a time for minutes or hours or days at a time, that can expand outward to further time horizons down the road and outward to other people within your community.
Yeah, great point. I just hope to add to that a little bit, because I think, the society still puts a lot of stigma around, depression and mental health and issues like that, because I just think people sometimes see it as a sign of weakness. And I just really, really disagree, because I've seen some of my strongest friends that I know that suffer from it. It's not to do with strength or weakness. It's just a phase I think humans go through, because we're natural. We feel these emotions as part of our human existence. We just have to acknowledge that it's there. And also, I think, the communication part that you said in the beginning, Allilsa, is like what I really agree on. It's just we need to be more open and be more supportive of one another through the process. And also with the access, for the point for access to therapy, I also think sometimes people do have access to therapy, but choose not to pursue it because, first, I think they may not want to unleash their own problems and project it onto other people, or they feel like, or they don't believe in themselves that they can stick through it, or it's necessarily going to help, even though they do want to be helped. So I think the more we can definitely try to educate people, and making help more accessible is definitely going to, help people when they're dealing with these situations.
Yeah, I think that's a really thorough and thoughtful answer in a lot of ways. It kind of inspired me to answer too. I think it also, going off of the last two answers and everything, it depends on what works for you. And I think another thing is that if you don't feel like you're worth it, you're not going to do anything to help yourself. Like if you're constantly hating on yourself, you're not going to care. You're not going to think about how can I get better. You're just going to stay in this slump and it's going to go downhill from there. But I think as people, we can provide encouragement to others. So don't be mean, obviously, unless you're, teasing your friends if they're okay with it. I think that we can be supportive in this highly competitive, for some reason, community of business people and creative people. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I have seen people I've walked into a room and they decided that they do not like me because I am also female, or I have like nice hair, or because of something that I've done that they heard, whether it's true or not. This happens in all communities. So first of all, like, be nice. And that includes being nice to yourself, because if you don't do what you need, then you're not going to be very much help to other people. You're not going to be nice to them. It's going to be this whole terrible thing. So going back to the actual question, how this relates, I think it depends on what works for each person. So if you have an inclination to use your art as a therapeutic mechanism, do research on it, talk to other people, or if you want to seek professional help in addition to that, you can do that too. It's a combination of whatever works for you. Like, personally, when I'm super out of it. I like to go make like color combinations and synesthetic, so I see colors with every sensory stimuli, and it's something that just kind of gets me refocused and going again. So I think it's up to us to find our tools and help others to find their tools, whether that's a more traditional route or a combination of traditional and new. If you're a researcher like me, maybe you go do a bunch of research on different kinds of art therapy and you do that, or you can take a class for it, or you can seek help. All of these are very valid options, but the main thing is be nice to yourself, because otherwise you're going to be really unpleasant to be around. And if you are nicer to yourself, you will do better things. It's important.
Yes,
I'm still here. I just want to let you guys know that my camera just died.
No problem.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that as well. I've been in the position of being somebody who's been refusing help for quite some time, mainly due to really bad experiences in trying to get help. As in England, don't want to sound a bit too harsh, but the mental health system here isn't the best. There's a lot of referrals, and then when you do get to see somebody, it depends on the person you get, because sometimes they can just not be helpful at all, and they'll just submit some really generic advice even when you're pouring your heart out to them. So what really helped me more was in that the communication aspect of being able to be a bit more open with people, instead of just going to the GP and ending up being, instead of being given therapy, being offered antidepressants and things like that, because I was always had a very big confidence issue in terms of that sort of thing. So like the others have said, I found that being able to talk about it with peers and being able to utilize those feelings in a more creative outlet was a bit more helpful than the attempt at seeking more professional help. So sometimes you can create an outlet for yourself, but in more extreme cases, then you really should. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one, because again, personal experience, it's they can be very poor, but I guess it does depend on the luck of the draw, really.
So I totally agree with that, Dominic. I myself have had weird experiences with like therapy and therapists. I've had one that it was going well, and then just something happened and I was just like, nope, I'm better. I'm just gonna stop seeing you. Or I've had some that I've seen for 1 or 2 visits and it just doesn't click. So what I like to do, and because again, like therapy can really be a hit or miss, and it's hard to open up to new people and just have them turn you away. I think part of what we need to do, and especially as somebody who's found some techniques that work for myself, is I like to just like, if anybody asks about it, I will share what those things are. And especially for those who don't have access to actual therapy, I think it is definitely part of our job as people who are aware of what's going on to sit there and say, these are some resources that I've used. These are some techniques that I can use to calm myself down. And whether it is something like Blythe was saying, where she does like an art, like color scheme that she likes to put together, or I like to practice like grounded breathing and like those kind of like meditative states and things like that. And I think making sure that we expose the community to those kinds of things. And when we have, you know, friends that we see struggling, or in my case, it's a lot of times students, I'm open of talking to them about, you know, struggles that I've dealt with and things that I've used. And in turn, it kind of opens up this discussion that's like this, and making sure that we do spread it and don't just say, you know, oh, hey, you know, I'm struggling, I have like OCD and anxiety. It's also saying, okay, I have this, but I have some techniques that work. Do you want to know anything that could help yourself? Or like, I'm really struggling and I could really use some help. And not being, and it's hard to get to that point, but not being afraid to reach out as well.
Yeah, I think like one more small point is something that like actually Aizhou turned me onto again is yoga. Like if you do yoga or meditative breathing, it can really help you feel more centered. I also believe in like daily cardio just to like take aggression out. I don't know if any of you others are kind of angry like me, but personally, I think that really helps. And I just wanted to like say I definitely agree with that point.
And also, guys, like I don't know, I also to like get rid of my stress, I box kind of like a few times a week, because like I think if I look at, myself in the mirror, or I look at something I'm frustrated about, it's good. Like, I don't necessarily think physical violence is the answer towards mental illness, but I think but exercising is definitely like a way better way to deal with this problem as opposed to alcohol and drugs. And I mean, whatever. I think like also to make art, we're often, like sitting in a room a lot, whether we're with people or with ourselves. So I think just getting the blood flowing, I think adrenaline is a real thing. And when we can get our blood pumping and find our systems, when we're happy, I think we're less likely or more open to dealing with mental issues and problems. Yeah.
So, Blythe mentioned art therapy. I want to talk about kind of like how art can help people with these issues. So, how can art? So, I guess just how can art help people with these issues, and what are some other ways of like minimizing stress? Yeah, I know I saw you talked about like exercising and stuff.
I can go with that one. Just in terms of tools and toolbox, I found probably whatever mental health issue you're struggling with, knowing you're not alone is probably one of the most important parts in just making sense of that issue. Having people who understand what you're going through and can listen to you and help you process what it goes through, but also just general companionship. I found that like even sometimes if you might not have like a person nearby or the ability to really communicate what it is you're going through, honestly, even just having like pets there for emotional support animals. I don't know if you can see here. I have this is Foggy. This is my one of my emotional support animals that I've had for about 2 years now, who's a very good friend, very therapeutic. He doesn't really want to be picked up, but he's. You wave hello? Hello. Hello. All right. I'll let him go away.
What's your cat's name?
It's Foggy.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Foggy. And then show your one over here. This is Stella. She's a girl.
Oh.
It's also a very, very sweetheart. Trying to get her to look at the camera. Hello. Hello. Okay, that's fine. Anyway, yeah, those are my cats that I always have to show off. They're great friends, great mental health therapy support professionals, and also I think as you mentioned on the point of even drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism. We might get more into this later, but I've actually found that like developing a more healthy and sustainable relationship with certain types of drugs, not necessarily alcohol. I think alcohol is usually a no-go, especially if you're dealing with like anxiety or depression. Won't take your problems away, but there's a lot of more new interesting research surrounding some of these other drugs or substances that we've been taking for granted. In Oregon, we're working on decriminalizing psilocybin for therapeutic treatment. So not just like recreational use, but for guided mental health professionals to administer, traditionally known as mushrooms in like a therapeutic setting. So that's on the ballot for 2020, and we're working on pushing that forward as a new kind of treatment, and I'm really excited to see where that goes. And I think it's something that we overall shouldn't be discounting. I think, obviously, treatment from a doctor is absolutely recommended. Go with what you go with, but as with anything, you just want to find what works for you. Find the kind of medicines that work and things that you can develop a healthy relationship that'll help you function.
Sarah, are you trying to speak? If you can, we can't hear you.
Oh no, I wasn't. I'm just
Oh,
I
okay.
have like a muty thing, but I guess I could. I mean, I could probably talk on it a little bit. But something I've actually been trying to do to help my mental health, because I noticed I used to have like a nice hour. Well, not a nice, but I had an hour drive to work. I could like drive with like the windows down and like my music up, and it was just kind of like a weird highlight of my day. And since now I'm working from home, I've been inside all the time. I've noticed that that's really been taking a toll on my mental health. I've been trying to make sure that I get like a lot of music available to me. I've been trying to get some time to go outside. I've been trying to take my cats outside. And as much as that's kind of a hit or miss on whether they try to run away or whether they just roll around and try to eat grass. Situations like we're in right now, or even other, other events in your life that might change up your schedule. Make sure that you still keep those things that are that peace in your life. So whether that is, listening to music and being on a car ride, or whether it's talking to a friend or hanging out with your cats, making sure that you still have that. And again, yeah, it's no substitute for a doctor. It's no substitute for, making sure you have a proper diagnosis or that you get proper treatment if you need it. But it's something that, especially for people that it might not be as accessible, that we can try to do in our meantime.
I also wanted to touch on like the de-stress aspect. So personally, I believe that there's no way in this life to be completely stress-free. I just don't think that's a realistic point of view, but I hope some of you might disagree with me. I'm not sure. I learned this from my time interning at the Kurland agency. David Shillimson, who is Pat Metheny's long-term manager, did this really awesome workshop on like stress relieving techniques. So I think the biggest thing that you can focus on is, how do I minimize the amount of stress that I have versus trying to become completely obsolete of stress? Because a little bit is actually good. Like if you're trying to finish an entire project in a week and you're just like, I need to score this film, but I'm going to play Mario Kart, and you're not stressed about it, you're never going to do it. So I think it's trying to use it to motivate you in positive ways rather than letting it get you down. Like, oh no, I'm not good enough to score this film. Like, take a break once in a while, play that Mario Kart. Try to be disciplined about sitting down and doing your work when you need to, and make it a positive environment for yourself. Like if you know, okay, I was mixing for 6 hours yesterday, my ears are bleeding, I cannot listen to music today, maybe try to put it off for a day and like do something else that's productive. Write a business plan for something. Try to contrast your creative tendencies with business or practical tendencies. And also plushies. It's important.
So I just wanted to mention the way art can be incorporated into therapy is beautiful. Like child abuse, for example. There's this method called inner child, where you're drawing your inner child. There's this book, I forget the name, but it's inner child work therapy. And basically you take your left hand, which is very artistic, and you paint with, oh, sorry, not with your left hand, with your non-dominant hand. So for me, that's my left hand. And you paint with your left, I will paint with my left hand and write for that child with my left hand. And through that process, people can find healing. Then you have art therapies, music, where people have written of what's going on, like when they're hearing voices or experience hallucination, or art exhibits that walks you through that pain. And I say this to say, not only is art healing and can be healing and used as an art itself, but it can also be used as a way to raise awareness. So one of the things I led was a group called Peer Mental Health Alliance. And in that group, we did musical dance, we did art, we did performances, and the vary in an artistic way where we brought awareness of mental health to the public. Like, this is real and this is okay to talk about. So you can use art as an interpretation and public to raise awareness. So there's much room to explore and use art for countless of things, whether it's therapy or healing or raising awareness. Now, with that being said, I also agree with the animals. I have 4 guinea pigs and 1 dog. I don't have them up here with me. I have a 2th floor, but I wanted to point out as an artist that when I say artist, I'm talking about writing and films, everything else that incorporates art, not drawing, because I suck at but to be careful what we use as an outlet. For example, journaling for me can be an outlet, but if I'm exhausted from the work, because art is work, art takes amount of energy and you get burned out, journaling is going to only exacerbate that. Reading is only going to exacerbate that. So there's things that we have to be careful, because as artists, we think it might be helpful, that it might actually make matters worse. So I personally, I agree with Abigail. I do breathing, meditation, yoga. And one of the things I had to learn was just to be. Just being. Because my mind is always going 100 times fast. I'm always wanting to produce something, always wanting to write something, always wanting to create something. So I have to pause and be okay with just sitting under the tree and doing absolutely nothing but petting my guinea pig. That's it. So just being. One of the hardest things that my therapist said that anyone can do is just be. I thought she was kidding until I did it. So I just wanted to put it out there, like some of these methods that may be useful for artists in particular can actually make things worse.
Yeah, I've had that sort of experience myself, especially over the course of this lockdown. It's your brain just kind of makes you think, I really should do something productive as much as possible. Make use of this time, because you're going to have to go back to work at some point. So please make sure you spend it all. And then eventually your brain is just like, okay, that's enough. But then again, it's like, no, it isn't enough. You need to get back to it. And speaking personally, like I've spent quite a bit of the lockdown doing writing, and on low days, because sometimes use it to purge my emotions, but I completely agree that sometimes it can worsen you. So I say never feel too bad about procrastination, because sometimes you can just happily just put Disney Plus on and binge watch The Simpsons and still feel like we've had a decent use of the day. And it's all about striving to reach that balance. Once you get that balance, then you're on a sort of straight and narrow, perhaps not quite, perhaps not as ideal as you'd want it to be, but it's still something, and still something is better than nothing, or constantly stressing, or just trying to make the best time, just trying to constantly pump out productive things. But then if you keep doing that, the quality will lessen and you'll be even more dissatisfied. So it's a vicious cycle. So it's about breaking it.
Can I just chime in a little bit about that? I think I definitely agree with both of your points. And I just think my overall mindset about it is that we need to establish a relationship and an understanding with our mind and body. I apparently a lot of people in this panel are into yoga and meditation, as am I. One of my first yoga teachers told me that Shavasana, where you lay down with your hands out wide and your feet laid in front of you, and then where you simply take deep breaths in and out of your nose, is actually one of the hardest things in yoga possibly I can do. Sometimes I just struggle to breathe and be. And because I actually just moved to LA in right before the lockdown happened. So I got a lot of stress in trying to make this happen. And the first a month and a half when I got to LA, I was unable to create anything. I think I told Blythe about this, and I was like, hey, I think I have all this stress and anxiety over me that it stopped me from being able to create and get my juices flowing. So I learned 3 coding languages. I was very much trying to put my mind off creating, but I think when your body tells you, hey, I think I'm ready to pick this up again, it's way more productive. And you can, it's definitely become a creative outlet for me right now to kind of get rid of some of the stress I've been building up, and also just remember to take regular breaks and talk to your friends every single day.
I totally agree with everything you just said, partly because I've been involved in those discussions, biased. But I think it's also, just to reiterate, I think it's important to know when you need a break from something. Like, if you are, okay, so I started in music. I do many other things now as everything, but when I went to Berkeley, it was so rough, like the first semester, because everyone was all the time music, 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 music. And then I'm there and I'm like, okay, I like business and I also like swing dancing at MIT. Am I weird? And the answer from everyone at that point was, yes, you're weird. Why aren't you music, music, music? And that's not okay. Like, you should not do that to people. I think that we need to, as people in general, not make people feel bad if they're not doing like their primary activity all the time. Like it even comes up as like a really, really honest mistake with some friends that I talk to. Like, I'll talk to them and I'll be like, oh yeah, like today I worked out and I was teaching and I did all this curriculum stuff. And they're like, oh, so are you working on your album? And I'm like, oh no, I haven't worked on it in like a month. And you know, sometimes that's okay. Like Sarah Bareilles, she actually was very candid in a couple interviews that I heard, and she said, you know, there are some periods where I can't write anything, and that's okay. And then it just all kind of flows out of her. And I'm sure that being artistically inclined, all of us have had experiences like that, where it's just kind of all sitting in you, and then you sit down and you do try to do something else, and then your body's like, no, like you need to expel this right now, like write it down. And I think that's like part of being healthy and recognizing that sometimes that's what artist culture should be versus pumping it out all the time. Because if you try to do that, you might not be as successful, or you could short circuit, run into problems, and that decreases your artistic longevity.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with what you said about Berkeley. I think like a lot of like at least I've kind of been able to move past it, but like when I was first there, I felt like very pressured to do stuff, like spend more time in the practice room than I wanted to, and that kind of led me to having a lot of anxiety from being isolated, and then just like joining all these like orchestras and stuff that I didn't necessarily want, or I didn't want to join like 3 of them. Maybe I just wanted to join 1 of them, just because like that was the culture, and that's what I thought was expected of me. So I definitely think that there needs to be more, like at communities like Berkeley, I think there needs to be more like acceptance of like tolerance of people doing, not doing exactly that thing all the time, because people might want to do other stuff too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I 100% agree with all of that too. I know like in the teaching world, it's very weird to not have your entire life be teaching. And a lot of people expect that. And it's like, you know, oh, like I'm going to spend all my free time like cutting out these cute little things to hang on a bulletin board. And I'm like, can I sleep at some point? And then I also end up getting too, because I, you know, am artistic and I have friends that know, and I see them. My one friend, like she goes and she teaches and she comes home and she's making like Etsy crafts to sell. And I'm like, should I be doing that too? Like, should I be going right home from like work and then working on art? But I think it is important to say that there are some days, like I have my art journal right in front of me and I've been like doodling in it, like as like the day goes on and I like need to do something and have a release. There are some days where I'm like that and I need to really be doing something artsy all day. And there's some days when I just want to sit on Animal Crossing and run around and catch bugs, or days that I just want to put on Avatar: The Last Airbender and just sit on the couch and watch that. And I think we need to understand that you can be all of those things. You can go to a job that's not art. You can be in an artwork field. You can do art as a hobby. You could do art once in a blue moon and you could still be an artist. As long as you still have that at some point, I don't think that we think there is a stigma that you need to always be doing whatever your artistic field is, whether it's singing, whether it's drawing. You need to just constantly be doing that. And yes, practice is how you get better, but breaks are even more important. They are just what we need to do. And even if you just sit there and know, oh my gosh, I love art, you're still an artist. Like, you don't have to do something every single day.
Just a really quick one, because I've already spoken a lot, but I'm an educational consultant also, and I totally agree that like in education culture, which I find that a lot of artists are into, there's this pressure all the time to be like, what are you doing for your students? What are you doing for them? And it doesn't necessarily matter how much time you put into it versus how much thought you put into it and how you're able to help them. So that's something that I hope to see more of with other teachers.
I'm glad I'm not the only teacher who feels that way, because sometimes it honestly feels like I'm the only person who is not just 24/7 education, 24/7, reaching your kids. I've been sitting here, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're in lockdown. I have to like ramp up my teacher Instagram game so that way the kids all know I'm still alive. And I'm like, I'm still making lessons for them every single day. Like they're building like airplane gliders next week. Like that's work enough. I can take a step back. And I think especially, arts as well. If you created one awesome masterpiece, you deserve a break. If you finished filming one really great TV show or short film, you deserve that break. So yeah, it's important that we all remember that, even though, because I think everybody too, with social media, it's hard to see that not everybody's doing this all the time. They're only showing their A game. They're only showing when they're working. So if you were to post pictures and be like, these are all like these 20 awesome films that I've done, and to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, I haven't made a single film, but they're only showing you what they've done when they had that time and they had that motivation and they had that work. They're not showing you when they were just sitting there in their bedroom chilling and laying in bed for 3 hours because they didn't want to wake up. It's, a healthy mix of everything, but we're really only exposed to the quote unquote good parts.
So I do want to move on and just ask one final question, and then we'll do some Q&A from the chat. Can you all, or I guess it would be better to say, what positive messages can you offer to those experiencing issues with mental health right now?
I would say for me, one of the most important things is the same message they'll tell you in therapy or that you would hear from your friends or counseling, is that it's important to remember that like mental illness is not who you are. It's a condition or a struggle that you deal with the same way that you could deal with a physical illness, like having a cold. That if you have a cold or a broken bone or anything, that does not define your identity. It doesn't define your ability to succeed. It doesn't define your character or your personality. I know the hardest thing for me, and the hardest thing I would assume for a lot of people who've been dealing with these issues and not had an outlet to talk about, is that especially while you're really in it and in the most intense place where you feel like you can't really get out of the mental health situation you're in, the hardest thing about it is that it feels like it's your fault, and it feels like you're failing at having mental health or having a functional life or achieving any of your goals because you're just a bad person or something. And sometimes it really does take getting help, getting therapy, treatment, sometimes medication, to help you understand that it's not actually who you are. It's just it's a condition that you struggle with, and realizing that is the most important first step, I think, to acknowledging that you can get help and that you will eventually learn to cope with it better.
Yeah, I always think it's important as well to remember that people care. Sometimes when you're going through a really bad mental health time, you'll just be all consumed in a bubble to yourself, and you'll just feel like no one really cares and you're better off alone. And that's never the case, because being alone very rarely helps. So I think it's always important to remember that people do care, people in your life do care about you, regardless of what the voices in your head are saying. And always try to be as open as you can with the people you trust the most about the difficulties that you're going through, because often those are the ones that can help the most.
I 100% agree with that. And I know we were just talking about college. I actually, even though I graduated, I was talking to somebody I went to school with. And I mentioned that like her friendship when I was going through a really hard time, like was really like valuable to me. And she came back with, I had no idea you were struggling. Why didn't you tell me? And it was something that it was very easy for me to just sit there and say, well, nobody cares. I'll just shut myself out. I'll just pretend that everything is normal. But I was like, she was like, you should have told me. I would have like, I reached out. I would have helped. Like I was going, and she was going through the same struggles. So I would have had somebody to lean on. And I think a lot of times we forget. I'm very bad at like, I'll have friends that I will talk to and then just like totally be like, well, they don't care about me anymore. And I'll just kind of leave them whenever I'm going through like a darker time. And they're there for you. And even if it's like 3 years down the road, she was sitting there and it's like, you know, if you still need anything, she's there. Like she's been trying to keep an eye on me. And I think we shouldn't discredit the fact that we do have people in our lives that care about us. And even if you don't, like if there's ways, I mean, you probably do. A lot of it is just that mental feeling that we don't have people here for us. There are so many people that care for you. And if you don't know anybody, you can privately message me and I will be your friend.
I definitely agree with all of that being said. And also, you know, like we can reach out to the people we know and be like, hey, like, how are you doing? Like maybe we can FaceTime, maybe we can do a Zoom call, we can have a Hulu watch party or anything like that. I think, you know, especially in the time that we're in right now, because I think although I really enjoy spending time alone, like I am, oh my God, hi, I love your cat. I get a lot of my energy from social interactions and from other people, which is just like, so the quarantine has really made me like think, hey, like how can I replace these experiences when I'm just by myself? The thing is, it can't, although we try to, but it never really truly replaces the human experience. But I feel like the more we make an effort, the more we initiate those efforts to be with one another and to support. I think that's all we need. So.
My message is short and sweet, and it's from Peter Gabriel, who is, for many reasons, relevant to this conversation. Don't give up. Listen to the song.
Yeah, I really feel like those are pretty powerful messages. So we can do Q&A now. So whoever wants to ask a question can type it in the chat, and then I will read it, and then however many of you want to respond to it can respond to it. And also, if
sorry, can I interject?
Yes.
I just wanted to leave with
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so
It's
sorry.
all right.
You go.
It's all right. Only because a lot of people mention reach out to people you care, and I want to bring it back to marginalized communities like LGBTQIA. Sometimes you don't have that. You know, you've been in your circle that you thought care about you, but now you came out that you're transgender or that you're gay, and you've lost all your support and all of the people you knew. You know, especially in conservative families or even in religious families. You know, so I just wanted to point out you may not have that. And I get you, I understand you. And so this message may be a little bit different, but if you don't have that support and you don't have those people, you can certainly seek those. Justus, you said this earlier, by social media groups. So you can join LGBTQIA groups. And right now, I mean, COVID is going on, but in real life, you know, there's so many groups. And I think joining community-based groups where you feel that your identity is respected and where you can find people you can talk to is important. I just wanted to leave that in the table because I know that not everyone has support, and and they're even in this time dealing with very difficult family members. So just know that there's amount of support that you can reach out to.
Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry I move on too quickly. So now we can do Q&A. So whoever has questions can write them in the chat, and I'll read them. Okay, so Emma Hindle asks, do any of you have advice for people with social anxiety who are having difficulty with finding support during COVID, who can't easily do Zoom calls or video chatting for support?
No joke, Animal Crossing. Like, that is something that, and I mean, I'm kind of the opposite. I'm very much an extrovert, but due to medical issues, I had to like fully quarantine myself in the beginning, and I was going nuts. And being able to talk to little virtual villagers made me feel a little bit better. Or joining other like online gaming communities, like if Animal Crossing isn't your jam. So, you know, I'm on like MMOs, and I have different people that are in like my guilds that I can talk to. I definitely see a lot of power in like gaming and more nerdy communities, especially because a lot of times too, like there seems to be a lot more people that like are a little bit more anxious about going out and socializing, or they don't have like the means to go out. They're not in a safe like place that they can go. I have friends that are like on farms in the middle of nowhere, and they're like using a hotspot on their phone because there's no Wi-Fi where they live. But I think it's a great way to kind of help you get that social interaction, especially when it doesn't feel like you're talking to a real person. I think it makes it a little bit easier sometimes too.
I agree. Groups online, we can really underestimate them. This is super nerdy, but I'm like obsessed with Star Trek. I watch it all the time when I'm working out or baking or doing anything. It's really bad, but I think that it's actually kind of fun. I'm in a lot of like interest groups for that on Facebook. I have a sourdough starter named Odo. I posted it on there for anyone that knows. Odo's the shapeshifter. He looks like a sourdough starter before he takes on any form. It went viral, so that's cool. And I'm definitely like an extroverted introvert, so I think that's really important for me at this time, because I literally have never been inside in my entire life this much, which I'm sure is like similar for a lot of people. So I think it's again like finding what works for you, and if that is posting a weird photo of your sourdough starter on a Star Trek page, cool.
Yeah, we should replace handshakes with these. Does anyone else want to
Works
take
for me.
that?
Yeah, and just to add to that really quick, there's so many social media platforms. There's Twitter and Tumblr and Facebook and a whole bunch, Reddit, just to name a few. So finding where you can find yourself. Everyone has a different way of communicating. And within those social media platforms, there's always a different group. So you go into their search boxes and you can find people you can relate to, whether that's LGBTQ or people of color or social anxiety. You know, find what you're looking for, and then you'll be able to find what that's saying. You'll find your tribe.
One thing I do also want to point out is that although I really, really appreciate all the communities that have been like super vibrant and like thriving at this time, but also I am also that kind of person. If I'm on social media for an extensive period of time, I get anxiety from that too. So I've had to just force myself to, for example, like to take some time like during the day when I'm reading a book, just leave my phone in the kitchen while I'm on the balcony reading, or try to, you know, like sometimes I think technology is an anxiety within itself. So just, I think knowing yourself and just remember to check in with yourself every day and see how you're doing is like an important part of getting through this together.
Yeah, I agree. Like especially if your work involves social media at all. Both me and Aizhou are product influencers, so our social media requires us to be like mostly professional, like all the time, like A game content. Otherwise, we're not going to keep our followers. So I think it's important to leave that behind sometimes and like make a Finsta account where you can post whatever you want or like message your friends really weird things. No one's going to see it, hopefully. So yeah, I agree with that point too.
Dominic, do you want to add anything to this?
Everything's really been said, really. I mean, I guess text-based software like Animal Crossing was mentioned. That can be very helpful in just having that, just keeping yourself occupied, and it gives you that little warm feeling as well. I play it myself, and yeah, and sometimes even just meme groups can be a lot of fun as well. Just even as I'm in quite a few posting groups, like the Star Trek one as well, which is really good. And it's just sometimes just communicating with people on a very light basis can just really just pass the time and make you smile.
Cool. So there's one more question. It's for Allilsa, but then after, other people can jump in too. From Monaja, what community support groups have you used that you would recommend? So I think it's time out like specific like names of groups.
So I created a group called Mental Health Pandemic in Facebook, and that's been really supportive for me and other people. It's our mental health, but specifically around COVID. Like my family is annoying me because of COVID, or I can't go out, or right now I was supposed to graduate during these times, but now I'm not able to. People are able to really post about their mental health, but specifically related around this time, which is great versus maybe other spaces where it's just overall mental health. So that's been helpful. And I'm in non-binary groups. I identify as non-binary. So there's one called Disabled Non-Binary. That's been, I'm mostly created communities that are more private. It's basically I have friends and we built a group within the friends. This is like a great way to like vent with people, and then the public doesn't really hear it. So we've created networks like that. Women's with PTSD, I use that one and it's really great. And Latinas Risings. Yeah, I forget the names of countless of one, but those are the few ones that I can think from the top of my head. I'm more of a Facebook platform person, so those are the groups I use within Facebook. And I'll share in the group the link to the group.
Yeah, I shared a group to I think it was the right one. It was
Oh, okay, awesome.
yeah, mental health pandemic, yeah.
Yes.
And I knew you were in it, so I know it's the right one. Anyone else have groups that they'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I put a couple in the chat that have been relevant to me lately, so definitely feel free to join. One of them I started recently called I Kissed Fundamentalism Goodbye. That's for just me and a lot of my friends from growing up who've lived in very sheltered and sometimes emotionally abusive religious environments, and it's just a place for us to all kind of process that together. So if that's a background that you come from, I would definitely recommend checking it out, and we'd love to hear from you.
I don't have any specific groups, but I find even groups that like center around your hobbies or different things that you're interested in can also just be a good support, even if they're not like support specific. So I have a few that are about like makeup groups. I have a bunch of Animal Crossing groups. I have groups with like vegan recipes, and like you'll even just find people there that you can talk to. So it's kind of neat that you have those, or people even like branch out onto it. So like there's one of my like makeup groups, they also have one that's for like, you know, it's like beauty and banter. So you can talk to each other about things that are bothering you, but it's like still the same people from that core group. So it's pretty cool. Like they're all on Facebook, but I feel like that's a really great community to get involved and be able to talk to people.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. I primarily use like meme groups and cosplay groups, and really just stuff that goes with my hobbies. And once you find that specific niche that you have, then there's a group for very much everything. So once you find those people, then hopefully they'll be able to help out and just helping you in a very unconventional way of support, I guess, but a valid way all the same.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've been sharing a lot of Facebook groups in here, and Facebook is a really great platform for community and groups around a very like specific interest or identity, and that's great. But another great platform to consider for people, especially if you're maybe looking to preserve a little bit more anonymity, might be a good idea to look into Reddit. Instead, it has a very similar dynamic to like Facebook groups that organized around a very specific community or interest, but it's a lot easier to just like make an anonymous Reddit account that where your online persona doesn't have to get traced back to like your real life identity as easily as it might be on something like Facebook.
There are just putting it out.
You just cut out. Could you repeat that?
Oh, sorry. Am I good now? Good. Groups that are mental health based.
Okay, well, if no one has anything to add, I think we can conclude this. I want to thank all the panelists and everyone who watched. I think it's a really important issue, and I feel like it needs to be talked about a lot. Thank you. And if panelists want to leave their info, like a website or something like that, in the chat, you can do that.
Thank you, Justin, for the opportunity, and thank you, everyone, for sharing the space with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I was actually really enjoying it. And I'm kind of glad that this convention is on a virtual platform for conversations like this, because I think a lot of general comic conventions have a lot of more like, you know, fandom discussions or things like that. But I really appreciate that we could all have a safe space to talk about different topics like this that affect a lot of people who go to conventions and just a lot of people in general. So I'm really thankful for everyone coming here, and I loved all the different ideas and all the links and all the connections. I know a lot of people were super happy about seeing a panel like this as well. So thank you for coming to WebCon. Thank you so much, everyone.